Hi everyone, welcome to ABC Interactive English. I'm Mike.
I'm Rainbow.
And today and tomorrow we're going to be looking at a very interesting museum that I'm sure a lot of you will want to visit after you read this article. Now this museum is a little unusual. Mostly when we think of museums, we think of, art museums, right? History, natural history, where they might have bones of animals and dinosaurs, things like that. And of course, the famous art museums with paintings and sculptures, but there are also some strange museums around. I remember I went to a medical museum in Scotland once that was filled with doctors' samples and weird things from the human body. It was a little creepy and gross, but very interesting. Have you ever been to a strange museum?
Yes, there's a very weird museum in Danshui.
Oh, here in Taiwan.
In Taiwan.
Okay.
It's in the middle of the street with all the food, and it has very weird creatures inside of it. It's kind of like a Guinness Book of World Records type of place where you see like statues of the fattest person in the world, or there's I think there's like it's like a turtle that looks like a lizard, or like a turtle with two heads or something like that. Like it's quite weird. It's also a bit freaky too.
Oh, since it's here in Taiwan, people might want to visit. Do you remember the name of the museum?
I think it's the Ripley's Museum of something. Ripley's Museum of Strange Things.
Maybe Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a famous series of books, and they opened a weird museum filled with weird things. Well, today we're not looking at a weird museum, we're looking at a museum of failure. That's right, a museum of failed things. Things made by companies, most of them, that just didn't work. And it says it's a good place for bad ideas. I agree.
I want to see this.
A failure would be a good place for bad ideas. So let's check out this good place full of bad ideas.
We all know about companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. They are big and very successful. They make a lot of products for us to use.
All right, so before we get into the article, we will, as usual, be talking about and explaining some of the more interesting words in our article for today. And actually, some of those words come from the title.
Yes.
So let's go back over that again. It says, The Museum of Failure, a good place for bad ideas. Now, we'll be using this word a lot, museum. What is a museum? It's usually a large building, although they can be small. But in a museum, you'll have a collection of interesting things. These things will probably be related by topic or subject or interest or something like that. I've been to toy museums, shoe museums, weapons museums. They have all sorts of museums. Somewhere out there in the world, someone in the government, maybe someone who works at a university, or maybe just a rich person who likes to collect things. They will then put them in a place, could be a big building, could be a smaller place, and then they will allow the public, that's us, to go in and just look at this interesting stuff so we can learn things from visiting the local museum.
Yes, and the second word we have here is failure. We usually don't put that word together with museum, but today that's what we have here. Failure, when we have a word that ends in URE here, failure is a noun. So fail is when I don't do well on something. It doesn't work, I'm doing poorly. So in school, if I fail, that would mean I get probably like lower than 60%. It's like over 60, that's pass. Under 60, that's fail. It means I did a bad job. It didn't work out. I failed. So if a person is a failure, oh, that's a terrible way to call a person, but that means that they didn't do well in many things that they tried in life. But in this case, we have a museum of failure. I guess that just means all the items that didn't work out. Maybe they were built, maybe they didn't sell well, maybe they broke down really quickly, and it's a museum full of all of these things that failed put together. So let's get started with this article, and we're going to be talking about the Museum of Failure. So the first sentence says, we all know about companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. Yes, we do. These are the very famous and successful companies that we can think of off the top of our heads.
Those are certainly some big companies in the world. There are big companies like Apple, Google, Ford cars, Nike shoes, of course. But then there are also smaller companies. Maybe your father, your mother, someone owns their own company. But this is an organization of people who work together to do business. They work together to make money, to provide a service, or to make things for people. It could be a company that makes almost anything you can imagine, or a company that provides a service for people, like a taxi company or something like that. But the idea is here that all of these people are working together. They are bosses, managers, and workers, and their goal is to make money and so that the company can be a success. And we should mention this word success because that's the opposite of failure, right? Companies aim for success, to make money, to grow, to continue to do their job. They don't aim for failure, which is not reaching your goal or maybe even losing money. So let's go back to those companies we mentioned, Apple, Google, Microsoft. Sure, we've all heard of those, as the article says. They are big and very successful. That's right, they make a lot of money and they make a lot of products for us to use, which is part of the reason they make a lot of money, because we buy a lot of the things that they make. So it is very fair to call those companies, among many others, successful.
Yeah, so like Mike mentioned before, success is the opposite of failure. And when we add FUL to a word, that becomes an adjective. So successful describes a person, a place, or a project, a company that does very well. So it might be something that makes a lot of money, or everybody buys its products. Everybody loves to go. Usually the business will be very good, or it does what it's supposed to do, then we say it's very successful. And if a person is very successful, it means they're wonderful at their job and maybe they're very well known for it. And successful companies such as Apple and Google, they produce a lot of products that I definitely love to use.
Absolutely. And products are basically the things that we buy from these companies. Products come in all shapes and sizes, from cans of soup or bags of chips, types of products you buy at a supermarket, maybe shampoo and soap you might buy at a drugstore and a pharmacy, cars, airplanes,
iPads.
Anything you can imagine that's right, that you can buy and sell and send through the mail if you're buying products online. Those are the things that companies make. Many other companies, though, sometimes we would say they don't make products, they are services companies, like banks or something. They don't sell you things, but they do things for you. But products are those things that you buy and take home with you after you have gone shopping. All right, let's take a break and then we'll come back and find out some more about some of these unsuccessful products in the Museum of Failure.
However, they also make mistakes. Some of their products were failures because they failed to sell. Dr. Samuel West was interested in those failures, and he started to collect them. Soon, he had a lot of failed products. He wanted to share them with the world. So, he started the Museum of Failure in Sweden in 2017.
So even successful products and successful companies don't always start out that way sometimes. As we read in the next sentence, however, they also make mistakes. They, meaning the companies we talked about before that were very successful. Some of their products were failures because they failed to sell. So maybe they worked, but nobody really liked them and people didn't really buy them, so they were considered failures in the end. They didn't do well in the market.
That's right. And here, this word fail is the verb form of the noun failure. When you have a goal, when you try to reach that goal and you don't quite make it, then you could say you failed, all right? We can talk about failing a test, as you mentioned, by getting a score that is below what your teachers expect, or we can also just talk about a plan that you make in your life and then because of what you do or some bad luck or just the way things work out, it didn't work, it failed. You might have a plan to get up really early and get to school so you can study for your test, but you know, your dog was making a mess in your house and you missed the bus and all of these troubles came along and you didn't reach your goal, so unfortunately you failed. It's part of life, but hopefully by planning things and being prepared, we can fail less than we do the opposite. Succeed. When you reach your goal, you succeed. So hopefully you do that more often. All right, let's get back to our article and find out about the companies that have failed in some of the things they've tried. It says Dr. Samuel West was interested in those failures, and he started to collect them. It's very interesting. He's a doctor. We don't know if he's a medical doctor you might meet in a hospital or a doctor of another kind, but I guess he was kind of thinking, you know, we all talk about the big successes of these big companies, but you can also learn a lot from learning about failure, where some of these big companies didn't quite reach their goals. So he decided to collect all this stuff and put it in a museum for us.
Oh, interesting. So that's right. The word collect means to bring something together into a group and you just keep them all together kind of for your own safekeeping or maybe for a display. It's the thing of a similar category. As we mentioned before, museums have something called collections, and that's the noun form of these items that have a similar topic or subject. And you don't have to just collect things if you're putting them in a museum. You can also collect things for fun. For example, when I was young, I loved to collect seashells from the beach and also stamps from my travels. Did you collect something when you were young?
I still collect things.
What do you collect?
I collect books and records.
Vinyl.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, collections, that's the group of things that you have. And yeah, some people do like to collect. And it's when it's a passion, when it's a hobby of theirs, we might even call them collectors. Put an O-R at the end of collect, and you have that person who's a collector. All right, let's get back to Dr. Samuel West. He sounds like he was a collector of these business failures. And then it says soon he had a lot of failed products. So he would be the guy who would go out a year after no one wanted that product, and he would buy a bunch of them just so he can have them in his collection. He wanted to share them with the world. I think this is interesting because when you talk to business people, one of the things they often say is you learn more from your failures
than your
successes. But we don't really talk about those so much. So he had this idea that maybe other people, not just in the company, but in the world, can learn from these failures too.
What a smart guy.
Yeah.
So he started the Museum of Failure in Sweden in 2017. I really want to visit this museum.
I do too, but I feel bad because his museum's been open for more than 5 years, so the museum's not a failure. He succeeded with his museum
of failure.
It would have been better if it just closed after a year.
The Museum of Failure failed.
It would have been perfect, but
no one would see his collection.
That's true. Now we can still go and visit it because it was a success. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. But I don't know about you. I'm really curious about what we would see in the Museum of Failure. I'm already thinking of some of those products from the past that weren't very good. So come back tomorrow and we'll see if some of the ones you might think of are in this strange museum. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
We all know about companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. They are big and very successful. They make a lot of products for us to use. However, they also make mistakes. Some of their products were failures because they failed to sell. Dr. Samuel West was interested in those failures, and he started to collect them. Soon, he had a lot of failed products. He wanted to share them with the world. So, he started the Museum of Failure in Sweden in 2017.
Hi, I'm Tina. 我们来看一下这一课的重点单字。第一个 museum 名词博物馆。I went to the National Palace Museum with my family last Sunday. 上周日我跟家人一起去了一趟故宫。National Palace Museum 国立故宫博物馆。第二个单字 successful 形容词成功的。Andrew is a successful businessman. Andrew 是一个成功的商人。下一个单字 fail 动词失败未做到。fail 加上 ed 变成 failed， 它可以当过去式的动词，也可以当形容词，表示失败了的。The doctor failed to save the boy's life. 那位医生没能拯救男孩的性命。最后一个单字 collect 动词收集。When did you start to collect coins? 你从什么时候开始收集钱币？接着我们来看一下重点文法。第一个 make a mistake 犯错，这是一个固定用法。Mistake 是指错误的意思。当我们犯超过一个以上的错误，我们可以用复数 make mistakes。我们来看看下面这个例句 I'm not blaming you, we all make mistakes. 我不是要怪你，我们都会犯错。下一个文法 Somebody is interested in something. 某人对某事感到有兴趣。Interested 表示感兴趣的，后面固定用介系词 in， 再接受词。我们来看看这个句子 My mother is not interested in sports. 我妈妈对运动不感兴趣。最后一个文法 A shares something with B。A 和 B 分享某事物。Share 是一个动词，表示分享、共同使用的意思。我们来看看下面这个例句。
Hey, that's mine!
I'm a bit hungry. Would you share some cookies with me?
Well, if you asked.
以上就是这一课的重点单字跟文法，回去记得要复习哦。我们下一课再见，拜拜。
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen.
I'm Vivian.
We're going to play a game called Guess the Bear. Each of us has 3 words or phrases on these cards. We're going to read 2 sentence examples for each one. Instead of saying the word, we're going to say the word bear instead, and you have to guess what the word is, and you have 1 minute to do all 3. All right, let's get started. Start the timer. This is a verb. Number 1, my grandfather bared old baseball cards. Number 2, she has been bearing dolls since childhood.
Collecting.
Very good. All right, this is a verb. Number 1, he bared to make any improvement at school. Number 2, I was sure I passed the test, but actually, I bared.
Fail.
Yeah, that sucks. All right, this is a phrase, 3 words. It's easy to bear if you're not paying attention. Number 2, I'm sorry about the error. I must have bared bear.
Made a mistake.
Good job. Very nice. You did good. Whenever I hear phrases like 3 words, like
I know, I started to panic a little bit.
My brain stops. But yours were pretty.
That was a good one.
That was a good one.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
And plus, you're very smart, Vivian.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. All right,
Are you ready for your turn?
I am.
All right, let's go. This one's an adjective, one
Okay.
word. After the bear surgery, she could walk again. The bear businessman wrote a book about investing.
Successful.
Good job.
Okay.
Okay, this one's a noun, one word. My class went to the Bear of Natural History. The Louvre is the most famous art bear.
Oh, you know how to say that.
The Louvre.
I'd be like Le Verver, okay? It's
took
museum.
French.
Right.
You're right. Okay, this one's a phrase, 3 words. I bear animals, so I became a biologist. She bear, hearing more about the project.
Again?
I bear animals, so I became a biologist. She bear, hearing more about the project.
Was in love with? No, in love with. No.
Close.
Second, one more time. Second one.
She bear, hearing more about the project.
Was obsessed with. I don't know.
Is interested in. So I am interested in animals, so I became a biologist.
Okay.
She is interested in hearing more about the project.
I went straight for the intense emotion.
Yeah,
In love with.
I was like,
I'm in love with it.
See you next time.